Leon Reverse was the kind of man people couldn't help but trust. His magnetic personality and charming demeanor concealed an unsettling lack of moral compass. His confidence, stylish wardrobe, and knowing smile made him a master manipulator, a con who could glide through any social scene undetected. For Leon, people were just puzzles to be solved, assets to be unlocked. And for him, Evelyn Harper was the jackpot he'd been waiting for. Evelyn Harper was a self-made success story. Rising from a modest background, she'd built a thriving consulting firm in San Francisco, becoming a staple in the city's business elite. Evelyn had an air of strength and intelligence, though the isolation that came with her achievements was evident in her personal life. At 48, single and focused on her work, she hadn't had time for love. But when Leon Reverse entered her life, that changed. Evelyn met Leon at a high-profile fundraiser, and he wasted no time charming her. His stories were captivating, weaving tales of travels, family, and adventures that Evelyn found irresistible. Leon painted himself as a philanthropist, an investor with a passion for helping others. He became a regular at Evelyn's office, always with a bouquet of flowers or some small token to remind her he was thinking of her. In no time, he was swept up in her life, drawing ever closer with each passing week. Leon's ambition was razor sharp, and his tactics were subtle. He began by listening carefully, learning about Evelyn's dreams, her fears, and her vulnerabilities. He knew she was isolated, her daughter Leah Harper the only close family in her life. Leah was 24, a recent college graduate struggling to find her footing. Leon viewed Leah not as a threat, but as an additional asset to exploit in his growing scheme. Before long, Leon proposed to Evelyn. Although her friends were skeptical, Evelyn was blind to any warnings. She saw Leon as the partner she'd never thought she'd find, the man who could be her equal. And so, within months, they married in a private ceremony. The celebration was small, tasteful, and discreet, just as Leon had insisted. For Evelyn, it was love. For Leon, it was an acquisition. Leon knew that if he was to fully take over Evelyn's fortune, he needed to ingratiate himself into her family in every way possible. Leah Harper was young, impressionable, and fiercely independent. She had always maintained a slight distance from her mother, feeling overshadowed by Evelyn's powerful persona. Leon noticed this fracture and began subtly inserting himself into Leah's world. At first, it was just little gestures, a comforting conversation when Leah was feeling low, thoughtful gifts tailored to her interests, and a reliable shoulder whenever she needed to vent about her latest struggles. Leon painted himself as someone who understood her, a kindred spirit in a way. His support became addictive to Leah. Soon, what had started as simple friendship blossomed into something far more dangerous. Leon's seduction of Leah was both methodical and cruel. Leah had initially resisted his advances, knowing deep down the betrayal it would represent. Yet, Leon's persistence wore down her defenses. He spoke to her vulnerabilities, luring her with his insight and charm. Leah fell for Leon's manipulation, convincing herself that their bond was something real, something exceptional, something she couldn't ignore. This complicated, tangled affair carried on for months, with neither Evelyn nor Leah fully understanding how deeply Leon had ensnared them. By the time Leah discovered she was pregnant, she was trapped in a whirlwind of emotions, torn between her loyalty to her mother and her attraction to Leon. In her fear and confusion, Leah kept her pregnancy a secret, unsure of how to proceed and terrified of what the truth would unleash. As for Evelyn, she was too occupied with Leon's seemingly growing interest in her business to notice the changes in Leah's behavior. He began attending meetings with her, offering his advice on critical decisions and even stepping in as an unofficial advisor at her firm. Although Evelyn was initially flattered, she began to feel uneasy. A number of financial transactions in Leah's accounts had raised questions for Evelyn, but she struggled to believe that either her daughter or her husband could be hiding anything. It was only when her financial advisor flagged irregularities that Evelyn's suspicions took root. Juanice gnawed at Evelyn's mind, yet she was unable to confront the man she had fallen for and the daughter she cherished. It was a private investigator, hired to dig discreetly into Leon's background, who brought the cold, undeniable truth to Evelyn's doorstep. The investigator's report, a stark document filled with evidence of Leon's previous schemes, painted him as a career con man. Evelyn learned of Leon's history of seducing wealthy women, draining their finances, and disappearing without a trace. Evelyn Harper felt her world collapse as she read through the investigator's report. Page after page, it laid out Leon Reverse's deceit in unrelenting detail. Every line revealed another layer of his past manipulations, wealthy women from coast to coast, each convinced they were the one Leon had truly loved, each stripped of their wealth and dignity. The man she had trusted and let into her life was nothing but a skilled predator. For days, Evelyn kept her discovery hidden, all while trying to keep up the appearance of normalcy. She watched Leon closely, observing how he effortlessly moved through her world, smiling at her colleagues, managing meetings, speaking with the staff at her firm as though he had a genuine stake in it. He even spoke of his plans for their future together, making her stomach turn. Evelyn knew she had to confront Leon eventually, but she needed proof that would sever him from her life entirely. She began gathering records, financial documents, and any paperwork that showed Leon's involvement in her business. Evelyn's goal was to make it impossible for him to challenge her when the inevitable separation came. But her investigation led her somewhere unexpected, to Leah's finances. As Evelyn sifted through the documents, she noticed unusual withdrawals and transactions. Payments were being made to unfamiliar accounts, and Leah's finances seemed depleted far beyond what Evelyn had believed possible. Evelyn's shock turned to horror as she realized the truth. Leah, too, had been ensnared by Leon's deceit. It all started to make sense: Leah's recent mood swings, her secrecy, her strange emotional distance. Leon had targeted both mother and daughter, calculating his every move with cold precision. Evelyn's hands shook as she processed the reality. Leon had torn her family apart, his seduction of Leah not only cruel, but something Evelyn could barely fathom. Now, not only her own security but her daughter's future was in peril. She knew she couldn't confront him alone, not yet. Leon was too cunning, and any misstep could put them both in danger. With each passing day, Leon's presence in their lives grew stronger. To Evelyn's disgust, he continued to shower her with affection, using endearments and small gestures that now felt like insult. Leon was careful, subtle, and endlessly charming, his grip on both women tightening with each deceptive gesture. But Evelyn's knowledge of his game gave her clarity. She began to see his every action as a calculated move, his every smile as the smirk of a predator lurking beneath a mask. Meanwhile, Leah was sinking further into a dark confusion of guilt, shame, and helplessness. She was alone with her secret, the pregnancy that loomed over her every decision, the daily reminder of her betrayal and of her complicated feelings for Leon. Trapped between her mother's potential wrath and her own vulnerability, Leah kept everything hidden, spiraling into a state of despair. Evelyn's secret investigation continued, and her fears for Leah's safety only grew. Determined to free her daughter, she began to reach out discreetly to her trusted contacts, hoping to secure the legal leverage she needed to sever Leon's hold on their lives. But Leon was watching closely. He sensed a change in Evelyn, a distance in her eyes, a sharpness in her movements, and with his honed instincts, he began to suspect that his perfection was under threat. One evening, Evelyn returned home to find Leon waiting for her, an unusual expression of calm suspicion on his face. He questioned her movements, his tone subtly threatening. Evelyn deflected, using her practiced business demeanor to keep her responses short and neutral. She knew he was testing her, gauging whether his control over her was slipping. Evelyn's heart raced, but she maintained her composure, knowing any sign of fear would only embolden him. While Evelyn held her ground, Leon turned his focus toward Leah. he began spending more time with her, increasing his control by further isolating her from her mother. Leah became increasingly reliant on Leon, who provided her with just enough comfort to keep her tethered to him, even as he pulled the strings that deepened her despair. Evelyn saw the toll it was taking on Leah but felt powerless to intervene without jeopardizing her carefully laid plans. One evening, Leah, overwhelmed by her circumstances, finally broke down. She tearfully admitted her pregnancy to Leon, hoping he might offer her a way out of the guilt and shame consuming her. But Leon's response was cold, calculating. He saw Leah's pregnancy as yet another tool, a perfect weapon to ensure his control. If Evelyn ever confronted him, he knew he could use Leah's secret to drive a wedge between them. Leah's desperation grew, and Evelyn's need for action became urgent. She realized that every passing day brought them closer to ruin, and as Leon continued to weave his web of lies, Evelyn began to formulate a plan to end his manipulations once and for all. Evelyn Harper had reached her limit. The knowledge of Leon's deception, the grip he held over her daughter Leah, and the impending threat to her business pushed her into action. She crafted a plan with the help of her private investigator, a veteran named Arthur Miles, whose calm demeanor and meticulous nature provided Evelyn with a much-needed anchor. They devised a way to expose Leon's criminal activities without tipping him off too soon. Arthur suggested creating a trap, a carefully staged scenario to catch Leon in the act of attempting to seize Evelyn's assets. They would arrange a transaction, a major shift in her finances that would tempt Leon. They would wire a substantial sum to a business expansion fund, with hidden safeguards to track any unauthorized access to the account. If Leon attempted to transfer the funds, they'd have concrete evidence of his theft. In the meantime, Evelyn worked to reconnect with Leah, trying to gently bridge the distance that had grown between them. She hoped Leah would sense her mother's support, but Leah was evasive, racked with shame and guilt she could not articulate. Leah still believed she was alone in her plight, unaware that Evelyn knew the depths of Leon's manipulation and that her mother was fighting to save her. The weeks passed in a tense silence, with Leon oblivious to the careful preparations being made against him. He continued to charm his way into every corner of Evelyn's life, playing the role of the perfect husband while keeping Leah emotionally tethered. Evelyn's performance as the trusting wife was flawless, even as her stomach churned each time she met Leon's gaze. Then, one evening, Leon took the bait. Late at night, Evelyn received an alert on her phone. Someone was attempting to access the expansion fund. Evelyn's heart raced as she watched the activity unfold. The fraudulent transfers Leon was initiating appearing in real time. Arthur, monitoring from a secure line, recorded every transaction and downloaded the evidence. The next morning, Evelyn acted. She confronted Leon with a calm, collected fury he hadn't anticipated. She accused him of betrayal, displaying the documents that outlined his attempted theft. For the first time, Leon's charming facade wavered, but only for a moment. His expression shifted quickly, turning cold and menacing as he realized his control over Evelyn was slipping. But Leon had one final weapon up his sleeve. He threatened to reveal Leah's secret if Evelyn moved forward with any legal action, intending to use the scandal of Leah's pregnancy to keep Evelyn compliant. He believed Evelyn's love for her daughter would be enough to silence her. Yet, Leon underestimated Evelyn's resolve and the strength she drew from the knowledge that Leah needed her protection. Leon knew his options were dwindling. With Evelyn preparing to go public with her evidence, he could see his empire crumbling. To him, there was only one way out: to disappear, taking with him the last of Evelyn's assets and the one person who still believed his lies, Leah. That night, Leon found Leah alone at home, looking more lost than ever. He preyed on her vulnerability, insisting that they could still be together, that they could escape the chaos of Evelyn's fury if they acted quickly. Leon painted Evelyn as the villain, a controlling mother who only wanted to keep Leah isolated and subservient. His words struck at Leah's deepest insecurities, and in her fragile state, she agreed to leave with him. By the time Evelyn discovered that Leah was gone, panic consumed her. She knew Leon's escape plan was underway, and she understood the danger her daughter faced. Evelyn called Arthur immediately, and together they traced Leon's last known movements. Every minute mattered. Evelyn could barely contain her fear, her mind racing through the worst possible scenarios. Arthur managed to track Leon's car to a remote motel just outside the city limits, a low-profile place where Leon was likely planning to regroup before making a permanent escape. Evelyn and Arthur, accompanied by local law enforcement who had been briefed on Leon's activities, made their way to the location, hoping they weren't too late. Inside the motel, Leon grew frantic as he sensed the authorities closing in. He was cornered, and his anger boiled over. In a desperate attempt to keep control, he grabbed Leah, holding her close as a human shield, ensuring no one would dare approach him. Leah, terrified and confused, finally began to see through the layers of his manipulation. She realized the darkness she'd allowed into her life, but it was too late. She was now his captive. Law enforcement surrounded the motel, and a tense standoff began. Evelyn stood among the officers, her heart pounding as she watched the scene unfold. She could hear Leon shouting threats, his voice filled with the desperation of a man whose lies had finally caught up with him. Evelyn pleaded with the officers to save her daughter, but they warned her that any sudden moves could put Leah in greater danger. Inside the room, Leah tried to reason with Leon, her fear intermingled with the faint hope that he might release her. But Leon's trust in her had crumbled. She was now as much a liability as Evelyn. Backed into a corner, Leon became erratic, pacing the room as he clutched Leah with a tightening grip. As the tense standoff stretched into the early hours of the morning, law enforcement weighed their options carefully. They wanted to save Leah without triggering a violent confrontation, but Leon's desperation made him unpredictable. Inside the motel room, the air was thick with fear as Leah clung to a fragile sense of hope, trying to reason with Leon despite the terror coursing through her. Evelyn, outside with Arthur and the officers, could barely breathe. Her daughter was trapped with a man she had loved and trusted, a man who had shattered their lives and exploited their deepest vulnerabilities. She silently willed Leah to stay strong, to survive this nightmarish ordeal. Evelyn could not help but feel responsible for all of it, for allowing Leon into their lives, for being blinded by his charm, for failing to protect Leah sooner. But there was no time for guilt. Evelyn needed to remain focused on helping Leah get out alive. Leon's threats grew louder, his demands shifting from money to a car to safe passage out of the city. He seemed disoriented, as though he hadn't planned for this scenario and was now scrambling for any way to escape. The officers urged Evelyn to stay back, but she refused, insisting that if anyone could reach Leah, it was her. She felt the urge to call out to her daughter, to tell her she was there, that she wouldn't abandon her. Finally, Evelyn made a choice. She shouted Leah's name, her voice cutting through the stillness outside the motel room. "Leah, I'm here," she called, her voice trembling but strong. "I won't let him hurt you. Just hold on. We're getting you out of there." Inside, Leah heard her mother's voice. She had never felt so conflicted, torn between the woman who had always been her anchor and the man who had lured her away from everything safe and familiar. Yet in that moment, hearing her mother's plea, Leah's mind began to clear. She saw Leon for what he truly was, a dangerous, manipulative man who would do anything to preserve his own freedom. Leon, sensing Leah's shift in loyalty, tightened his grip. He demanded a car once again, shouting at the officers that he would hurt Leah if his demands weren't met. But the officers outside were ready, and they signaled to Evelyn and Arthur to prepare for a tactical breach. The officers moved in swiftly. In a synchronized maneuver, they breached the door, shouting commands and attempting to de-escalate. Leon's rage erupted. He pulled Leah in front of him as a shield, clutching her arms so tightly it left bruises. His face was contorted with anger, his eyes wild as he barked threats at the officers. Evelyn, standing at the edge of the scene, could barely watch. She fought the impulse to scream, to run into the room, and tear Leah out of his grasp herself. Every second felt like an eternity as the officers tried to negotiate with Leon, who grew more unhinged by the moment. Suddenly, Leon lunged toward the door, dragging Leah with him. He screamed that he would kill her if anyone got too close. But in the chaos, Leah managed a small act of bravery. She twisted her arm free for just a split second, a brief but pivotal moment that allowed the officers to act. They fired, and a single shot rang out, piercing through the heavy tension. Leon collapsed, his grip finally loosening as he crumpled to the floor. Leah stumbled forward, dazed and trembling. Evelyn rushed to her side, clutching her daughter in a desperate embrace as officers moved quickly to secure the scene. It was over, the nightmare shattered by a single, echoing gunshot. As Leah's body sank into her mother's arms, Evelyn held her tightly, whispering reassurances that neither of them would ever have to see Leon again. But the cost was severe. Leah was injured, shaken not only physically but emotionally. The trauma of the past months of the manipulation, the betrayal, and the violence left its mark on both mother and daughter. Paramedics arrived, rushing Leah to the hospital for treatment. Evelyn stayed close by her side, refusing to let her daughter out of her sight. Leon Reverse was gone, but the pain he had caused lingered, a scar that Evelyn knew would take time to heal. In the days following the standoff, Leah remained in the hospital under careful observation. The physical injuries were straightforward to treat, but the emotional toll of her entanglement with Leon would be a far more challenging recovery. Evelyn, never leaving Leah's side, was also forced to confront her own culpability. The emotional wounds of Leon's betrayal ran deep, leaving her questioning every decision she had made since he entered her life. Leah slowly opened up to her mother, piecing together the story of how Leon had manipulated her, his deceitful promises, and his relentless charm that had drawn her in despite her better judgment. She admitted the shame she felt, the feeling of powerlessness that kept her from confiding in Evelyn. In those quiet, honest moments, mother and daughter began to rebuild their relationship piece by piece, bonded by a shared sense of betrayal, yet comforted by the newfound openness between them. Evelyn began the process of disentangling Leon's impact from her business, undoing financial damage and repairing the reputational harm caused by his presence. She reached out to old friends, explained the situation, and carefully navigated the mess Leon had left behind. Rebuilding her life became Evelyn's focus, a way to reclaim her identity and prove to herself and to Leah that they could survive even after everything Leon had done. Months passed, and while the scars of Leon's deception remained, Evelyn and Leah began to find peace. Leah had moved back into Evelyn's home, and they leaned on each other as they worked through the complexities of their experiences. Evelyn attended therapy, slowly learning to let go of the guilt that had plagued her, understanding that Leon's manipulation had been a carefully orchestrated act, one she couldn't have easily foreseen. Leah, too, sought support, determined to reclaim her life and heal from the emotional entrapment she had endured. She resumed her career plans and even began to speak publicly about her experience as a way of warning others against falling into similar traps. Her courage grew with each passing day, a testament to her resilience. Evelyn learned to forgive herself, and in time she found purpose in helping others who had been deceived or taken advantage of. Her story and Leah's became a powerful warning, a reminder of the dark potential lurking behind even the most charming facades. As mother and daughter moved forward, they found strength in each other, bound not only by family but by survival. The scars left by Leon Reverse would always remain, but they no longer defined their lives. Instead, they became symbols of resilience, of a hard-won strength that allowed Evelyn and Leah to rebuild, start anew, and create a future free from the shadows of the past. Evelyn Harper and Leah Harper had been through a trial of fire, one that had exposed the darkest aspects of human nature. Yet, from that fire, they emerged not unscathed, but transformed. Leon Reverse's manipulative schemes had lasting impact, yet his legacy was one that Evelyn and Leah refused to let control their future. In the quiet aftermath, as life resumed its course, both women worked toward healing in their own ways, forging lives marked not by betrayal, but by newfound strength.